schedule as far as which days of the week we're doing which things. So Monday, you're going to write something. Tuesday, you're going to work with whatever it is that you wrote. So either doing some kind of revision or doing some kind of peer editing, working with that writing. Wednesday, you're going to read something, and then Thursday, you're going to talk about what you read. And that conversation that comes on Thursday has had a bunch of different forms this year. So earlier on, I had groups organized. So I pre-positioned students in groups that they would break out into these smaller groups. They would prepare discussion questions ahead. So we talked about what makes a good discussion question versus what makes a bad discussion question, how to write a question that makes people engage and makes people want to contribute their opinion versus just having one answer. We would have small group discussions, breakout discussions, where each small group would have a conversation with the people they were in the group with. A little bit further into the year, that Thursday discussion transferred into sort of an online discussion. I created a discussion board using a website called Class Chatter. I have since stopped using it. I am still looking for a better resource to have online discussions, and so I'll be excited to next year to explore some more options with that. But I thought that was important because in going to college and being a college preparatory school, almost every college has some online component, whether you're taking classes entirely online or if you're just in a class that has, go home, your homework for this week is to participate in this online discussion board. Some students have no idea how to do that. They don't know the etiquette. They don't know what it means to, put their ideas out there on the internet. And so we talked about what does it mean to, how should you phrase things? How should you, what expectations do you have of yourself when you're communicating digitally, even if it's not in person or not a formal writing assignment? So then we had a lot of online discussions in the sort of middle part of the year, and then the later part of the year, we had a lot more. We had like a roundtable discussion where we'd all sit in one big circle, and everyone would contribute their thoughts and ideas. How I kind of differentiate between what we do in college and career versus what we do in English 4 is that the writing and the discussions in college and career are more about yourself. So it's not about necessarily you reading a passage and analyzing and trying to figure out what the author meant, but it's figuring out what are your opinions on what that author is saying and how can you then verbalize or put it down in written word. And so talking about current issues and having students research what's going on and reading current articles, talking about things that are going to be directly relevant to them as they go off to college next year has definitely kept them more engaged this year than what I've seen in the past with the college and career course. And alongside, applying to colleges, applying for scholarships. This year we had them do a interview portfolio, so they had to write a resume, they had to write a cover letter. They sat down and had a formal interview with one of our staff members just so that they could practice doing what all of those things are like, which to me is hugely beneficial because I did not have that experience when I was in high school, and it definitely would have benefited me. If I could have learned the things that I can have the opportunity to tell them now in the college and career class, I would have been much better off. I hear all the time people talking about like things that they wished they would have learned in high school, or that we're teaching all of these things like the quadratic formula. When am I ever going to use it again? But all the things that people say they wish they knew are things that I can then address in that class. So I had a day even when Ohio had their primary elections, I had them research how to apply to have an absentee ballot and how to look up their polling locations and stuff like that. So very practical things that they're definitely going to have to use at some point in their life, and it's kept them producing high quality work because it's work that they're engaged in. Especially towards the beginning of the year, I spent a lot of time in college and career talking about like how to write an argument, so I can introduce the term like warrant. And then if I talk about warrants in English 4, they know what I'm talking about. Being able to participate in an academic discussion. So even if they are talking about something like The Wife of Bath, Chaucer, they've practiced, they know what's expected of them in an academic discussion on something like use of social media in schools or something like that. So something that's super practical to them, a current topic that they're very familiar with, that's very relevant to them. Those skills have been kind of practiced and learned there. That way in the core class, in the literature, they already are comfortable doing that, and they can kind of just focus more on what it is they need to get out of that text. When I first saw the collections textbook last year, I was actually very excited to see how similar a lot of the texts were to texts that I was already teaching. So I would say almost half of the anchor texts in collections were things that I had already taught in English 4 in previous years. So when I had taught English 4 last year, I taught it kind of in a chronological way. So I started with Beowulf and then ended with more contemporary authors. This year, Beowulf was the very, very last thing, or one of the last anchor texts in the book. So the order was different, but the way that they were grouped made sense to me. So for instance, reading in the unit Voices of Protest, reading Martin Luther King's speech alongside Modest Proposal, that made perfect sense because you're talking about calling out some kind of a social issue and asking for change in an argumentative way. So I liked that. One of the things that I've started doing a lot more this year is opening up the world of utilizing online summaries. So things like SparkNotes, Shmoop is the big one. If you haven't looked up Shmoop, definitely do it. They market themselves as like they speak the language of students, which I think SparkNotes is a little bit more inaccessible. Shmoop is a little bit more casual. So what I did with Modest Proposal was take the Shmoop summary of the entire thing, and then I broke it down. So each piece of the summary, because they break it down into bullet points instead of just having one long piece of text. So the first part of the Shmoop summary, the first bullet point, here's what it says. Now, here's the original text. So now your responsibility is to look at the original text and try to figure out how much of the original text is being covered by that piece of the summary. So taking the summary part and then kind of going backwards to the original text and trying to figure out whoever wrote the summary, how did they decide what to include in that one bullet point. So then I had them do that throughout the whole summary. That way they understood what the text was about first, which can be very shocking, reading Modest Proposal and not anticipating that this person's going to be writing about eating babies, of course. So then I actually saved the satirical part of it until after they had read the entire thing and understood it, because I wanted them to have the experience of, what the heck is this guy talking about? Like, the summary says something about eating babies. Like, where do I find that in the text? Is that really what he's saying? And so then after going through all the summary, making sure they understood the text and were familiar with the language in the original text, then I went back and talked about the different satirical devices that were being used throughout all of it. And then continued on talking about things like Key and Peele, Saturday Night Live, other satirical news sources, things that they would be familiar with. And then I had them watch an episode of Key and Peele, or a sketch of Key and Peele, and had them try to figure out what satirical devices that were used in Modest Proposal are also being used. Especially with students today, they all have phones, they all have computers. When they go to college and they're in a class where they have to read literature, it's the first thing they're gonna do. The first thing they're gonna do is not be to open the book or to look at the poem. The first thing is gonna be, what information is already out there? Like, what work do I not have to do? But then it's the balance of, what work do I not have to do because it's already been done, and how do I still satisfy this requirement from whatever this teacher's asking of me? So the way that I want them to think about it is not as that this is not a substitution for the original text, but it's a resource. So if you can find the connection between this little piece of the summary from Shmoop, this one bullet point where they paraphrase these 3 paragraphs, what is it in those 3 paragraphs that doesn't make it to the summary? Specifically and closely with the text is something that they're still uncomfortable with, which kind of baffles me, because I know that they've been doing it for 4 years in all of their English classes. But being able to see the text and work with it while they still have a teacher there it's almost like a safety net. I know that once they leave the classroom, it's almost like that's when the bell rings, that's when that interaction with that text ends. So being able to find a way to get them to have a little bit more agency, a little bit more independence in working with the text on their own, because it's not that they don't know how to do it. Like I said, they've been doing it for 4 years, but they almost rely on the idea that they're sitting in a desk with the book on their desk, and they can ask the teacher if they have questions, which is not how it will be when they are in college. So a lot of what I've been trying to do, my challenge has been, what can they do on their own? How can they get through this independently, whether it's in class or out of class? Towards the beginning of the year, that definitely was a big problem, but honestly, having them doing the writing skills part of it and being able to lay out, so like, here's my data, now what do I know about this? So if I know that, like, the wife of Bath says these 3 things, how can I figure out something about her personality through doing that? But then there is still the challenge of, how do they know that she says those things if they don't understand the text originally?
Okay.
I always go back to claim evidence warrant. That's kind of the phrase that I always go back to. They know what it means when I say it. CEW, they know what it means if I say analysis. They know that they need to find some kind of evidence or data and then analyze it. And also with AP, just the sheer amount of terms they need to know. So metonymy is something that I would never bring up in English for, but it's something that I talk about a lot in AP Lit because it's on the test, so they have to know it. I actually started teaching it halfway through the school year, which for an AP class is kind of terrifying because they have to take the exam at the beginning of May, so it was really only a couple months that I had with them. And they had previous months on their own, but I didn't have almost anything. So I used a lot of the information that's on the College Board website. They have a lot of discussion boards where if you are unsure of something, you can pose the question. A lot of very experienced AP teachers will be able to get back to you and possibly give you resources. They have a bunch of resources on the College Board website, and all of the information about the exam, which I knew almost nothing about. I didn't take AP Lit when I was in high school. I didn't really know anything about it.
Right.
And so just learning the structure of the exam itself, that was kind of what I focused on that first year. And then this year I had the opportunity to attend an AP training session in Cincinnati, which was extremely helpful because the people running it were graders. They were people that read all of the essays. Mm-hmm. So they told us what is it that they are looking for when they're reading an AP essay, mm-hmm. which was, again, very helpful. I could bring that information back to my students and say, this AP grader, this person who could potentially be reading your essays and grading them, wants you to do these things. So these are the things that we need to be doing. Mm-hmm. They don't say you have to read these 10 texts. Right. They say you have to read, something from this time period by mm-hmm. one of these authors, maybe. Yeah. But if you have something else you want to do, you can do that too. Mm-hmm. It's pretty similar in that way. For next year, we just kind of changed the way that we put together AP rosters. Previously, it was mostly just students that had been in honors since they were freshmen. They were just sort of put into that as this is kind of like the honors English class. This year, and going into next year, we've taken it more as it's not necessarily an honors class, but this is AP. So again, the standards are from College Board, not necessarily just saying that you're better at English, but that you are passionate about literature specifically, and that you are prepared to do college level work. And so this year, instead of having teachers fill out like letters of recommendation forms that then they would give to the counselors, this year we had them answer 3 questions and kind of had to put a little bit more emphasis on why they feel like they deserve to be in the class. And then we even had our 11th grade teacher, Mr. Poulsen, actually sat down with many of them and interviewed them on why they think they should be in the class. So the class size is a lot smaller for next year. This year I have 22. Next year I'm going to have, I think, 10. The ELL department has been a lot better in recent years at being available to have the conversation of what should I do with this text if the student has no ability to access it. My first period English class this year had a lot of students that had been in the program, in the ELL program. Some of them were just in their very final years of it and were just taking the test, kind of just exiting. But I had a co-teacher who would come first period almost every single day. And so she would help with those situations, and I would let her know my lesson plans ahead of time, and she could say, okay, so if you're planning on doing this, here's a thing that you might be able to do for these 3 students that I know would struggle with that.
And you did feel supported in that?
Yeah, yes,
okay.
Certainly, yeah. Anything else would be more things that align with what the EOC is going to look like, if that's something that's going to be, around. If, like you said, if we're going to have a test, if we're going to be using this to measure where our students are versus where they end up at the end of the year, how can we make sure that that's measuring what it is we're teaching in the class? So practicing multiple choice questions, stuff like that, like what you mentioned.